Today, we have a very special guest with us who has gone through a life-changing experience. They're here to share a deeply personal story about redemption, forgiveness, and transformation. A journey that took them to the edge of life itself and back. This story promises to be powerful, one that will resonate with anyone who has struggled with regret or sought a deeper purpose. Before we dive in, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. Make sure to hit the notification bell, too, so you're always the first to know when a new story is shared. And now, let's begin this incredible journey. It was an ordinary, sunlit morning, or at least it started that way. I remember the warmth of the sun as I drove down the familiar road, my thoughts elsewhere, tangled in a mess of plans and worries. Suddenly, in one blinding flash, everything changed. A screech of brakes, the crash, and then a silence more profound than anything I had ever known. I felt a strange, surreal weightlessness, as if I was hovering, separated from my own body, which lay limp and battered in the wreckage below. But I was no longer in pain. I felt a sense of calm creeping in, something almost serene. In that space, suspended between life and death, I became aware of a presence beside me. He didn't speak at first, but I sensed his name, Gabriel. The name filled my mind, unbidden, and with it came a feeling of knowing him, as if he'd been there all along, watching over me. He radiated a warmth that seemed to pierce through every doubt, every fear I had ever known. I felt safe, wrapped in a glow that soothed me in ways I didn't understand but longed to hold on to. "Ana Laura," he said softly, his voice more of a thought than a sound, echoing within me. "You've come to a crossroads." His words hung in the air, and I felt myself drawn toward him, pulled as if by some unseen force. I wanted to stay in that moment, to surrender to this peace. But Gabriel wasn't offering peace alone. He was here to guide me, to reveal a hidden truth. As we stood together, the world around us faded. In its place, I saw images from my past begin to unfold. Moments from my life, some beautiful, others painful, played out in vivid detail. Gabriel turned to me, his expression gentle but unyielding. "It's time to look back, Ana Laura," he said, his gaze unwavering. "To understand where you are, you must see where you have been." As I stood next to Gabriel, scenes from my life unfurled in a sequence that felt at once familiar and foreign. It was as if I were both a spectator and a participant in my own life. I watched myself, younger and filled with ambition and naivety, moving through pivotal moments with a confidence I barely recognize now. Gabriel's presence was a constant, solid, reassuring, but not interfering, as if he wanted me to see every detail on my own terms. One memory stood out, sharper and clearer than the rest. I was barely out of high school, trying desperately to fit into a mold I hadn't chosen but felt bound by. The pressures of society, the expectations to be a certain way, to follow the paths others laid out for me, hovered like a weight over every decision. In college, I remember going out with friends, letting myself be swept up in a crowd of people I didn't truly feel connected to. I watched as I gave in to influences that promised freedom but left me feeling more confined, less like myself with every choice. Gabriel's voice broke the silence. "You see, Ana Laura, each decision has a ripple, an unseen impact that extends beyond the immediate moment." His words were gentle, but they stung with truth. I felt a twinge of regret looking at my younger self, so eager to please, so willing to compromise values I hadn't yet fully understood. Then came a scene I had tried hard to forget. I saw myself in a dimly lit room, facing choices I wasn't ready to make. I could see the doubt etched across my face, a quiet plea for guidance that went unanswered. Gabriel watched, allowing me to relive it without shielding me from the weight of those decisions. I felt the shame, the frustration of knowing that, for all my supposed freedom, I had become a prisoner to my own fears and need for approval. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, my voice quivering with unspoken guilt. Gabriel looked at me, his eyes filled with a compassion that felt boundless. Because, Ana Lara, understanding is the first step toward redemption. Only by seeing the truth can we begin to heal. As we moved through the memories, I began to sense a pattern, a thread that connected each choice I had made. Each moment felt heavier than the last, like pieces of a puzzle I had refused to acknowledge. Gabriel was guiding me, but this journey was mine to face, and the weight of it settled deep within me as we continued. Gabriel and I drifted through my past, and I was suddenly plunged back into my teenage years, a time that seemed drenched in confusion and longing. I saw myself in the hallways of my high school, clutching my books and moving quickly, hoping to fade into the crowd. The pressure to belong was palpable, almost suffocating, and I remember feeling like my identity was something fragile, easily molded by the expectations of others. I watched as my younger self sought validation in the smiles and approval of classmates, in the glances that either invited me in or shut me out. Relationships came into focus next. I saw myself at 16, sitting awkwardly across from a boy I barely knew, fumbling for words, desperate to appear interesting, desperate to be liked. That boy was the first in a series of relationships I stumbled into, each one seeming to carry a weight that I couldn't comprehend at the time. I thought I was in control, that I understood what I was getting into. But looking back now, through Gabriel's unflinching lens, I saw how naive I had been. How I was so quick to trade pieces of myself for fleeting moments of acceptance. Gabriel's voice resonated softly beside me, breaking the silence. "You wanted to feel seen, Ana Lara," he said gently. "But in seeking approval from others, you overlooked the value of your own spirit." His words were like a balm and a burden, hitting me with a truth I had ignored for so long. I watched as scene after scene unfolded. Friends encouraging choices I wasn't ready for. Moments when I laughed off warning signs, thinking that nothing could really hurt me. There was a particular conversation with my best friend that played out before me like a movie. "You're overthinking it," she had said, rolling her eyes when I voiced my uncertainties. "Just go with the flow. Life's too short to worry." I had smiled, nodding, convincing myself that her words made sense, that this carefree approach was what I needed. But now, looking back, I felt a pang of regret. Gabriel's presence seemed to intensify beside me, as though urging me to absorb the reality of what I was seeing. These early relationships, each one marked by small compromises and growing regrets, had left a deep imprint on my soul. I could feel the weight of these choices now, the way they had shaped my path, steering me toward decisions that felt right in the moment but had ultimately distanced me from who I truly was. "You were never alone, Ana Lara," Gabriel murmured. "But sometimes, the loudest voices around you can drown out the whispers of your own heart." His words resonated deeply, and I realized that this journey through my past was more than a mere review. It was a reckoning, a reminder that every choice, no matter how small, carried a meaning I could no longer ignore. The scenes around me shifted, and suddenly I was transported to a pivotal moment in my young adulthood, one that I had buried deeply, hoping it would never resurface. I found myself standing outside a small clinic, the autumn wind biting against my skin. I was staring down at a pregnancy test in my hand, my fingers trembling as I tried to process the 2 pink lines staring back at me. I remember the disbelief, the rush of emotions crashing in, fear, confusion, and a strange, inexplicable surge of joy, all colliding at once. In the days that followed, I tried to tell myself it was no big deal, that I could figure it out. But the truth was, I felt completely alone, and the enormity of the situation was crushing. My mind drifted to my family and the judgment I feared they'd cast. My friends, with all their carefree advice, couldn't understand the turmoil boiling within me. And though I reached out for guidance, it felt as if every voice around me was urging me to take the easy route, to pretend this new life within me didn't exist. One conversation stood out. I was sitting with my closest friend, attempting to open up, to voice my fears and hopes. You can't throw your life away over this, Anna, she said, her voice firm. It's just not worth it. You have your whole future ahead of you. I nodded, forcing a smile, but inside, I felt a tearing sensation. Her words were logical, practical, yet something deep within me, something primal and instinctual, seemed to resist. I felt Gabriel's presence grow stronger beside me, as though he, too, felt the conflict tearing at my soul. It's okay to feel uncertain, Anna Lara, he murmured, his voice soft but penetrating. But there is strength in listening to the quiet voice within, the one that isn't swayed by fear or the opinions of others. I was left to relive that internal battle, the endless nights I spent lying awake, my hand resting on my stomach, wondering if I could find the courage to go against the grain, to choose a path that felt right for me, even if no one else understood. But fear had a firm grip on me. The expectations of society, the fear of judgment, and the voices around me all seemed to drown out that inner voice, leaving me feeling as if I had no choice but to let go. As Gabriel looked on, I felt a deep ache rise within me. The young woman I saw was so lost, so desperate to please others that she'd ignored the most precious part of herself. Gabriel's gaze was gentle but piercing. Anna Lara, sometimes the truest path requires stepping into the unknown, trusting in your own heart's wisdom, he said, his voice like a balm over an old wound. I felt the enormity of that decision, the weight of that moment when I had chosen fear over love, and the scar it had left on my spirit. This journey through my past wasn't just about seeing my choices. It was about feeling the emotions I had tried so hard to suppress, allowing them to surface in all their raw, painful truth. As Gabriel and I moved deeper into the memories, I was led to a moment I had tried hard to bury. The scene was stark, vivid in its details. I stood in a sterile clinic room, the walls painted a clinical white, and the faint smell of antiseptic filled the air. I could see myself lying on the examination table, staring up at the ceiling, my heart pounding, my mind numb. In that moment, it felt like I was suspended between two realities, the life I knew and the unknown path that lay before me, one I was too afraid to face. I felt a deep, haunting sadness, a hollow ache that grew as I watched my younger self go through the motions. I remembered every thought, every excuse I told myself. It's for the best. I'm not ready. This is what everyone said I should do. The voices of friends, society, and even family echoed in my mind. A chorus of reassurances that this choice was simple, rational, even necessary. And yet, beneath it all, a part of me had resisted, a whisper of regret that grew louder even as I tried to silence it. Afterward, I expected to feel relief, but what came instead was an emptiness I couldn't shake. I went home, sat alone in my room, and felt a coldness settle over me, a silence that was louder than any noise. The sadness was relentless, creeping into every corner of my mind, every waking thought. It felt as if something precious had been lost, something I couldn't name or understand, but that left a profound void in its place. Gabriel's presence beside me was unwavering, a steady warmth amidst the darkness of that memory. Some choices carry a weight beyond what the world can understand, he said, his voice gentle yet unyielding. Life is sacred, Anna Lara, and in choosing against it, we sometimes carry scars that touch the soul. I looked at him, my heart heavy with remorse. I thought it was what I had to do. I whispered, my voice thick with the emotions I'd buried. I thought it would make things easier. But it only made everything harder. Gabriel nodded, his gaze filled with a compassion that somehow softened the sharp edges of my regret. It's human to seek the path of least resistance, especially when we feel lost. But each decision leaves an imprint, and some imprints run deeper than others. The key, Anna Lara, is not to dwell in regret, but to seek healing, to understand the choices we made and find peace. In that moment, the weight of my choice became undeniable, a scar I couldn't erase but was beginning to acknowledge. The sorrow I felt was no longer just regret. It was a deeper understanding of the impact of that choice on my spirit, a recognition of how that single moment had shaped so much of my pain and my journey. Gabriel's presence reminded me that this wasn't just punishment. It was a chance to learn, to forgive, and to find a way forward, even from the darkest of places. Gabriel's presence became even more palpable as we moved forward, and I sensed that he was preparing me for something profound, something I couldn't quite grasp yet. The scenes of my past faded, and instead, I was engulfed in a soft, radiant light, one that seemed to emanate from Gabriel himself. There was a peace in that light, a depth that I could feel penetrating my very being, filling the hollow spaces left by years of regret and sorrow. In that space, I felt weightless, as if I had stepped into a realm where time and the physical world held no meaning. Ana Lara, Gabriel spoke, his voice now resonating with a solemnity that made my heart ache. There is something you must see, something that will help you understand the purpose of every life, even those that pass through us briefly. His hand extended, and with it, an image began to form within the light. At first, I saw only a faint outline, but as the details sharpened, I recognized what he was showing me. It was the soul of the child I had lost, a luminous presence that radiated innocence and beauty. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I felt a wave of emotions, grief, love, longing, all merging together, creating an intensity that both pained and healed me. Gabriel's gaze softened as he watched me, allowing me a moment to take it all in. Every soul has a purpose, Ana Lara. Each one carries with it a piece of divine light, a thread in the tapestry of existence, he explained. The life that was within you was not simply a possibility. It was a spark, a potential for growth and connection that was meant to touch your life and transform it. I struggled to find my voice, my emotions choked in the presence of this revelation. But I let it go. I whispered, shame and sorrow intermingling. How can I ever make peace with that? Gabriel's expression was one of deep compassion. We are given choices, and sometimes those choices lead us away from the paths we might have otherwise known. But each choice, each experience, is an invitation to learn, to grow, to come back to the truth within ourselves. He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. The soul you carried understands the journey you are on. Its love for you transcends any physical existence, and it has forgiven you long ago. Now, it's time for you to forgive yourself, to recognize that every life, seen or unseen, lived or lost, plays a role in shaping who we become. A profound sense of peace began to wash over me as I absorbed his words. In that moment, I understood the depth of the connection I'd had with this soul, even in its brief existence. It was as if, despite the loss, its presence had been woven into my life's fabric, guiding me in ways I hadn't realized. This revelation wasn't just about loss. It was about seeing the sacredness of life in every form, the interconnectedness of every choice and consequence. Gabriel's hand rested on my shoulder, anchoring me in that newfound peace. Each revelation is a gift, Ana Lara, an invitation to live more deeply, to honor the life you have and the lives that touch yours. His voice was gentle, full of warmth that soothed the wounds within me. I felt a release, a softening of the grief I'd held onto for so long. And with it, I sensed a glimmer of hope, a possibility that even in the face of my deepest mistakes, there was a path to healing and redemption. Gabriel's message had given me more than understanding. It had given me a sense of purpose, a reason to move forward with compassion and reverence for every soul, especially the one that had so briefly shared its light with me. The light around us dimmed, and I was pulled into another realm, a space both familiar and foreign, filled with a weight that seemed to press against my very soul. It was darker here, a place where emotions seemed amplified, where guilt and grief lingered like shadows. I could feel an energy, one that clung to me, feeding off my own sorrow and remorse. In this shadowed space, I sensed the weight of my choices bearing down on me, intensified by regrets I'd carried for so long. I looked at Gabriel, fear rising in me as I realized the power these shadows held. What is this place?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Gabriel's face was solemn, his gaze penetrating as he looked into the depths of my being. "This is the world we carry within, Ana Lara," he explained, his tone serious yet compassionate. "When we act against our own light, we open doors to energies that thrive on our pain, on the darkness we hold inside. These forces grow from unhealed wounds, from choices that distance us from our true selves." I felt a shiver run through me, the air around me thick with emotions I had buried, with parts of myself I had tried to ignore. It was as if every fear, every sorrow, every regret I had ever suppressed had taken form here, casting a shadow that obscured the light within me. The sadness that had once felt manageable now seemed monstrous, overwhelming, as though it had a life of its own. Gabriel stepped closer, his presence a barrier between me and the darkness that seemed to encircle us. "These forces aren't here to punish you," he said softly. "They are reflections of the pain you haven't yet faced, the parts of you still aching for acknowledgement and healing. Every choice that led you away from yourself created an opening, a wound that allowed these energies to settle in." A wave of understanding washed over me. I realized that I had spent years carrying these shadows, allowing them to grow in the quiet spaces of my heart, feeding on my guilt and shame. The darkness wasn't an external punishment. It was a manifestation of the suffering I had inflicted on myself, a mirror of the choices that had fractured my spirit. Gabriel's hand rested on my shoulder, grounding me in his presence. "Ana Lara, you have the power to heal these wounds, to reclaim the light that has always been within you. But first, you must face these shadows, acknowledge them, and release them." As his words sank in, I felt the weight begin to shift, the darkness loosening its grip. A part of me had resisted this truth for so long, clinging to the pain as if it were a penance, a way to atone for my past. But now, I saw that holding on to it only deepened the shadows, kept me further from the light. With a deep breath, I looked around at the shadows, meeting each one with the intention of understanding, of healing. Gabriel's presence steadied me, reminding me that I didn't have to face this alone. As I acknowledged each regret, each painful choice, I felt a gradual release, a lightness beginning to take root where the darkness had once held sway. Gabriel's voice echoed softly beside me. "True healing begins when we allow ourselves to see all that we are, the light, the darkness, and the spaces in between. Only then can we find balance, peace, and forgiveness." His words were a balm, a reminder that even in this place of suffering, there was hope, a path back to the light. As the darkness around us softened and began to dissipate, I felt a profound sense of vulnerability, as though Gabriel had stripped away every protective layer I had built around my heart. For so long, I had held tightly to guilt and regret, wearing them like a shield to protect myself from facing the deeper truth. Now, in the wake of this revelation, I felt exposed, my soul bare and aching. Gabriel stood beside me, unwavering in his gentleness and patience. "Ana Lara," he began, his voice like a steady flame in the dark, "there is a part of you that has longed for release, that has held on to pain because it believed it was the only path to redemption. But true redemption comes from a place of love, not self-punishment." I swallowed hard, emotions rising in my chest. But how can I let go of the guilt? How can I forgive myself after everything I've done? I don't know if I deserve it. My voice trembled, the rawness of my confession echoing in the stillness around us. Gabriel's eyes met mine, filled with a compassion that felt boundless. Forgiveness is not about erasing the past or denying what has happened. It is an act of courage, a commitment to choose healing over suffering. To forgive yourself is to acknowledge your own humanity, to accept that mistakes are a part of growth and that the spirit within you longs to be whole again. A tear slipped down my cheek as I listened to his words. For so long, I had equated forgiveness with forgetting, with diminishing the gravity of my choices. But Gabriel was offering a different perspective, one that allowed space for both accountability and grace. I realized that forgiveness didn't mean letting go of responsibility. It meant letting go of the self-imposed suffering that had kept me chained to the past. In that moment, Gabriel held out his hand. Are you ready to begin the journey toward forgiveness? To give yourself permission to heal? He asked gently. His question felt like a doorway, an invitation to step into a new understanding of myself. With trembling fingers, I reached out and took his hand, feeling a warmth radiate through me, filling the cracks left by years of self-doubt and remorse. Yes, I whispered, my voice small but resolute. I want to let go. I want to find peace. As soon as I spoke the words, I felt a shift within me, a release, a softening of the burden I had carried for so long. Gabriel guided me through a vision, one where I saw myself standing in a field bathed in light. In that light, I watched as each painful memory, each regret, was lifted and transformed, dissolving into the air like mist. I felt lighter, freer, as though each piece of my past that I released was creating space for something new. You are forgiven, Ana Laura, Gabriel said, his voice filled with a kindness that wrapped around me like a warm embrace. But the most important forgiveness is the one you give to yourself. The journey forward is one of compassion, of choosing to honor each moment as an opportunity to grow closer to the truth within you. I closed my eyes, feeling a peace settle over me, deeper than anything I had ever known. Gabriel's words became a promise, a guidepost for the life that awaited me. In that space, I felt the power of forgiveness, not as an end but as a beginning, a path toward healing and understanding that I would carry with me long after this moment had passed. And with that realization, I knew that I was ready to step back into life, to embrace it fully and to live with the compassion and wisdom this journey had gifted me. When I opened my eyes again, I was back in the stillness of my hospital room. Machines hummed softly around me, and the sterile smell of antiseptic filled the air. I could feel the weight of my body again, the dull ache in my chest and limbs. But something was different, a lightness in my heart, a quiet resilience I hadn't felt before. I knew that I had returned to the world not just as Ana Laura, but as someone who had glimpsed a deeper truth, someone irrevocably changed by what I had experienced. My family gathered around me, their eyes wide with relief and curiosity. My mother grasped my hand tightly, her eyes glistening with tears. "We thought we'd lost you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I could see the toll my near-death had taken on them, the worry etched in the lines of their faces, and it pained me to think of what I had put them through. But at the same time, I felt a renewed gratitude, a reminder of how precious these connections were, of how I had taken them for granted in my years of distraction and self-doubt. Days turned into weeks, and as I regained my physical strength, I began the journey of healing in earnest. I sought solace in quiet spaces, spending time alone to process everything I had seen, everything Gabriel had taught me. The shadows of my past no longer haunted me. Instead, they became gentle reminders, guiding me toward choices that honored the lessons I had learned. My life was no longer just about existing. It was about living consciously, with intention, recognizing the sacredness of each decision, each interaction. I started reaching out, connecting with others who had experienced loss, regret, and guilt. It felt natural to open up, to share my story, not as a warning but as a testament to the power of transformation. People responded, some with tears, others with gratitude, and I could feel a sense of purpose blooming within me, a calling to help others find their own peace, to help them navigate their own darkness with the compassion that Gabriel had shown me. One afternoon, I visited a support group for young women facing unplanned pregnancies, each of them filled with the same fears and confusion I had once felt. I spoke to them honestly, sharing my journey, my mistakes, and the hope I had found. I could see the impact in their eyes, a spark of understanding, of connection. In helping them, I found a deeper healing within myself, a sense that each choice, each experience, was now being woven into something meaningful. My days became filled with acts of kindness, not grand gestures but small, intentional choices that reflected my commitment to honor life, to honor the connection between us all. I found peace in nature, in quiet moments of prayer, and in the comforting presence of my family and friends, each interaction a reminder that I was never truly alone. Through this journey of healing, I carried Gabriel's words in my heart, his teachings a compass that guided me when I felt lost. I understood now that redemption wasn't a destination. It was a path, a continuous commitment to live with authenticity, with gratitude, and with love. My life, once defined by regret and fear, was now a testament to resilience, to the power of self-forgiveness, and to the possibility of finding light even in the darkest of places. As time passed, my life settled into a new rhythm, one that felt richer, deeper, and filled with purpose. I had emerged from my experience with a clarity that guided me in ways I hadn't known before. I found myself more present in each moment, more aware of the beauty and fragility of life, and more committed to living in a way that honored the lessons I had learned with Gabriel. My heart held a message, one that I felt compelled to share, a story of hope and transformation that could reach others who, like me, had struggled under the weight of past choices and self-doubt. I began speaking publicly, standing in front of groups that ranged from small community gatherings to larger audiences. At first, my voice trembled, but with every retelling, I felt a strength building inside of me, a conviction that grew with each person who approached me afterward, eyes glistening, hands shaking, often thanking me for saying what they couldn't put into words. "Your story, it gives me hope," they would say, and every time. It reminded me of Gabriel's guidance, his gentle insistence that my pain could become a bridge to healing, not just for myself but for others as well. I shared not only the darkness of my journey but the light I had found, the peace that had taken root when I embraced forgiveness and compassion. I spoke of Gabriel, the moments in the ethereal space between life and death, and the undeniable understanding that each life, each choice, holds profound meaning. I encouraged others to see their own struggles as invitations to grow, to look beyond their mistakes and find the lessons that could help them rediscover themselves. One evening, after a particularly moving talk, a young woman approached me, her eyes filled with tears. She reached for my hand and held it tightly. "I felt like you were telling my story," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "For so long, I thought I was alone in this, that no one would understand." I hugged her, feeling the weight of her words sink into my heart, grateful that my experience had somehow become a balm for others. In those moments, I felt Gabriel's presence again, as if he were smiling somewhere beyond my vision, proud of the path I had chosen. His words echoed in my mind. "Each revelation is a gift, Ana Lara, an invitation to live more deeply," and that's what I was doing, living deeply, with an open heart, choosing each day to honor the gift of life, even with its imperfections. My message became simple but powerful. No matter the choices we have made, no matter the shadows we carry, there is always a way forward. Redemption is real, and it begins with a willingness to face our past with honesty, to forgive ourselves, and to seek healing with courage and compassion. I urged others to embrace their own journeys, to see their struggles as stepping stones, not stumbling blocks. In sharing my story, I found a peace that transcended words, a quiet fulfillment that reminded me daily of the grace that Gabriel had revealed to me. Life, I realized, was about transformation, about allowing our wounds to teach us, to soften us, to help us understand each other in ways we might never have before. And so, I continued forward, my heart lighter, my spirit stronger, carrying with me the sacred message Gabriel had entrusted to me, that each of us holds within the power to find light, to become whole, to live with purpose. And with each step I took, I knew that my journey was not just my own. It was a beacon of hope, A reminder that even in our darkest moments, we are never truly alone, and that there is always a way back to the light. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and check out this next story. It's truly moving.